All right, welcome back, founders. We're here for our final part of building confidence and capacity for social enterprise. I'm actually quite sad it's the final part. I've been having a phenomenal conversation. Thank you, Gordon. Joining us here, as he has for part 1 and part 2, is Gordon Holly. He is the co-founder and the president and CEO of Humanity Financial, a Vancouver-based accounting firm that works with socially driven, purpose-driven organizations across the country. So, Gordon, now our part 3, we are actually going to talk a little bit about the corporate structures. I know we talked a little bit about that in part 1, but let's also talk a little bit about, can profit and purpose coexist? Because I am about bottom line. Nail the Numbers is all about bottom line. And just so that I can feel the resistance of founders listening in going, oh, but Gordon just said those purpose-driven business owners, all about me. The passion for me, for anybody who's listening that doesn't know this story, I actually have been through a bankruptcy. And the reason why the business didn't succeed is because there was no net profit. The revenues were there, but there was no net profit. And 8 years of running, 2009 just finally caught up with me. And there was nothing left, nothing in the tank for me to get through those times. So this is why I believe profit is important, because it's the capital, the retained earnings that we put aside that allow us to weather economic downturns. Now, I know we've had a really good conversation about this, and even though some nonprofits are not allowed to profit, you have some great suggestions for all of these nonprofits out there and social enterprises so that they can weather economic downturns.
Yeah, and this is the concept of making sure that your organization, regardless of whether it's a charity, a nonprofit, or a for-profit organization with a social purpose, make sure that they're fundamentally capitalized well. And when I say that, it can mean many things, but for most organizations, it means building up some kind of reserve fund over a period of time, setting aside a little bit of your profit every year to build up a reserve fund that can weather you in a storm. For example, we had COVID hit, and prior to COVID, it was we were finding it, and one of the organizations I was on the board of really struggled. The executive director wanted to spend all of the money on current programming because that was, where we could maximize our impact. And she didn't feel right about holding money back. But as a board, we worked with her, and we eventually came to the conclusion that we'd set aside $40,000 or $50,000 a year, and we'd gradually build up our reserve so that we had, 4 to 6 months of operating expenses in a reserve fund. Well, I got to tell you, the whole organization was pretty happy when COVID hit, and all of a sudden we had to pivot, and our revenue went down for the first few months. We were thrilled to have that reserve because it gave us the flexibility to rethink our business model, and we could deal with low revenue for a few months. And eventually, we had low revenue for the first few months, then the revenue picked back up, and we actually had a more successful year than we've ever had. But having that reserve in place is without that reserve, we would have been out of business within the first 3 months. So having these reserves being appropriately capitalized, having appropriate equity is really absolutely, for me, a very high priority in any organization that we work with to make sure that they're financially sustainable.
Yeah. I think in any organization, it's key. I'm curious, though, in a nonprofit, how do you actually show that on the books? Do you show it as a reserve fund because you budget for it, and it's showing that a portion of the revenue that comes in gets set aside for that specific purpose?
Great question. In nonprofit organizations, so long as you play by the rules, like the CRA does recognize that all organizations have to have some financial sustainability. So there's some leeway to allow nonprofits to build up a small cushion or reserve. But if the reserve gets too big, the CRA will say you're offside. So you've got to be, in a nonprofit organization, you've got to be careful. It's a lot easier in a charity, and obviously there's almost no restriction in a for-profit organization. So it depends on the legal and tax structure you have. But again, we're seeing more and more organizations with more complex legal structures where they have a for-profit for some things, a not-for-profit for some things, and a charity for other things.
Okay, so that sounds like that's a tax question.
Yep.
Whoever your account is that you're working with. So that's a great segue though into the legal structure. So you've already kind of framed that for us overall. And as founders are listening in, you can go back to part 1 where Gordon kind of mapped that out for us. But I know that you have some, and this is some of the work that you do with organizations across the country, right? To help them better understand what legal entity best serves that intention or that purpose, and how there can be a hybrid of several entities together, right? You don't necessarily need to pick one over the other. So maybe can you walk me through that a little bit again?
Yeah. Now, just to be clear, for the most part, it's the lawyers that do the legal structuring, right? They're the ones, you find a really good lawyer, whether they're focused on, charities, nonprofits, social enterprises, they can help you come up with the right legal and tax structure. There are, over the last 10 years, many provinces and states in the US have been developing new incorporation legislation. For example, in both the US and some states in the US and some provinces in Canada, you can now incorporate as a benefit corporation. And as a benefit corporation, and the rules are a little bit different in each state and province, but for the most part, you're required to have a social purpose. And in BC's case, I think the legislation just came out late last year. You're required to report back on the positive community impact that you have every year as a benefit corporation. It's still a taxable entity, but if you want to hold yourself out as being a benefit corporation and serving multiple stakeholders, there are some reporting requirements under that legislation. Now, those are different. So, you can have your for-profit corporation, you can have a benefit corporation, you can have a incorporated as a society, and you can apply to become a registered charity. So the regardless of the legal structure, any for-profit organization, which includes social enterprises, can go through an application process to become certified as a B corporation. And B corporations are certified by B Labs. It's a global organization. I think they're in 150 industries in 74 countries in the world. They're truly global. I think there's about 3,800 B Corps now, but I think they grew by about 40% last year, and it's really picking up. It's really accelerating. But in order to be certified as a B corporation, you have to go through an application process and tick a bunch of boxes to certify that you're doing all these good things, whether it's hiring a diverse and inclusive workforce, whether it's paying people living wages or above market wages, whether it's giving back to your community and serving underserved populations. Working on your supply chain to make sure that you've got criteria to select your suppliers that are consistent with, good environmental practices and good social practices. So in order to get certified, you need to accumulate 80 points. And so long as you get 80 points, you get certification. And then you need to recertify, I think it's once every 3 years. So the B Corp certification is available only to for-profit organizations. It's not available to nonprofits or charities. So it does get quite confusing between the variety of legal structures and the certifications that are available now. It takes a bit of time and effort to really get clear about what the options are for organizations that have social purpose. This is kind of a new world, and we're kind of having to figure it out together.
Mm-hmm. I think it comes back to that initial point in part 1 where you suggested start with the end in mind. Know what it is that you want to build, because that's going to influence what structure is most relevant, right, to whatever that end goal is. I suspect that you'll echo this thought. I know that many of the accounts that we've had on the show in the past have always talked about a collaborative approach between your accountant and your lawyer and your bookkeeper and your financial planner. Everybody should be on the same page. Everybody should be in the same room when you're discussing, this is what we're looking to build, and now work it out amongst yourselves and let us know how
Absolutely.
all these pieces start to fit together, right?
And this is where it pays to, be thinking really creatively and innovative about how you're going to combine profit with purpose. What are going to be the elements of purpose that you're going to provide to the different stakeholder groups? How much profit do you want to earn? I know we'll talk about this in a minute, but I think the general consensus now is, and don't get me wrong, building a social enterprise is hard, and not everybody's going to be successful. There are significant failure rates in small business today. Some social enterprises and small businesses aren't going to make it 5 years. Having said that, the organizations that are making the right investments today in their team members and doing these, focusing on all of their stakeholders, seem to have a higher likelihood of success in today's environment. And we're seeing actually that the organizations that are really focusing, BlackRock, one of the largest investment houses in the world, is applying social purpose criteria to the organizations that they invest in. It's almost like you can't afford to be solely focused on profit anymore, or at least that will be the case in the not very distant future. And organizations that are having multiple stakeholders and focusing on multiple stakeholders are actually becoming more profitable over the long term. We used to think that investing in social purpose and investing in governance and investing in, making sure we're not having a negative impact in the environment were costs that were going to reduce our profitability, and so we didn't do it. Now, if we're not doing it, it's actually going to reduce our profitability because the society's changed. People expect different things from our businesses and from our business owners. And they're rewarding the organizations that are thinking about their impact in the environment, their impact on their team members, and the impact on the communities they serve.
Yeah, the carrots have changed, right?
Absolutely.
The carrots have changed. Maybe we'll just entitle this episode, "The Carrots Have Changed." But
it's absolutely true.
It is. And I think that, to your point about the businesses that don't make it, regardless of the legal structure, I think that, back in the day, and I'm thinking about Michael Gerber right now in the E-Myth, right? Where you get a lot of business owners that they start their business because they are passionate about what they do, right? They like making the pies. And COVID, as we talked about, has really shifted that perspective to say, how does the pie serve the person right now? What is the purpose in the pie? Because it can't be just about you. Those are the people that fail, right? It has to be about what do we want to create, and not just for me, but for others, for all the stakeholders, right? For everybody involved here. And that holistic, collaborative, convergent idea of impact for everyone, I can see why those businesses make it. Like, how could you not, right? As long as you're modifying and you're measuring, and to your point, you're remaining innovative and thinking throughout the process.
Absolutely. And I think, the principles in the E-Myth are more important than they've ever been. But I think because they're mostly about building the right systems and holding everybody accountable. Yeah. Right? That's really the gist of the E-Myth, is make sure we develop the right systems and the right processes that make sure all the jobs are getting done right so that the customer is getting the most value. All we're doing now is expanding that to focus on multiple stakeholders. So it's a little more complex because we're now not just focusing on the customer and profit for the shareholder. We're also now focusing on making sure we build the right team, making sure we create the right environment, making sure we've got the right culture, making sure we're set up to serve multiple stakeholders. So the E-Myth is still one of my favorite books of all time. I'd recommend it to anybody starting a small business. And I think it's more important than ever.
Yeah. Well, Gordon, thank you so much. It's, one of the things that you just mentioned, that word culture, and it is hard for me to believe that an organization that doesn't have this purpose-driven initiative and incentive behind it how you wouldn't infuse culture within your organization with it. Like, it must just be, I can only imagine what it's like to work at Humanity Financial, right? Like, it must just be the culture and the beauty, and everybody just driven to make the world a better place and to help businesses become better and stronger. So thank you so much for investing your afternoon, your time with me today. So much value in our conversation. Thank you.
Oh, Tanya, you're very welcome. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I really look forward to more conversations within our business community and our social enterprise community in terms of how we can navigate these changes in a successful way. Because as more and more businesses become focused on social impacts, I think we all have to work together. Citizens, governments, businesses, all working together to make the world a better place. It's the only way we're going to be able to deal with things like climate change, Black Lives Matter, all these incredible challenges. I think the only way we're going to be able to solve them is if we all work together, and recognizing that businesses have an absolutely important seat at that table, I think is critical. And frankly, as I say, it's a lot more fun working with people that are passionate about making the world a better place. So I'm thrilling our journey. We're learning lots as we go, and I'm just thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about it with you today.
Oh, well, thank you again. COVID was a phenomenal teacher to actually show us how to start working together, and then layered in with your expertise here, Gordon. I'm excited to learn more and to look into, the B Corp, the certification in that space, and making an impact. So thank you again for all that you do. Your information is down in the show notes. So for anybody who wants to reach out to Gordon and his team who are supporting socially based profit or purpose driven, profit too, though they can't coexist. This is the lesson in this, but supporting organizations across the country. So I encourage you definitely to reach out to Gordon. You can tell this is his sweet spot, and he's determined and dedicated to make a difference in this space. Thank you again to our episode champion, Community Future Saskatchewan. Thank you for all that you do and the purpose and the passion that you bring to Saskatchewan and our business owners, and helping them to survive COVID and thrive through it. So thank you, Gordon, again. Thank you, and founders, thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next episode of the Gab Lab. Bye for now.